Good morning, Mehta sir. If I could just request you to turn on your camera, and Pragya as well, if you could just switch on your camera. Yeah, hi, good morning. So we seem to be getting participants, so I think let's wait for like 2, 3 more minutes and then we can start. I think we can start, and we would hopefully be getting more participants as the time progresses. Okay, so very good morning to all. My name is Architect Tushar Mandal, and I am a teaching faculty at the Periyar School of Architecture, New Delhi. I welcome you to the fourth webinar in the Every Friday webinar series, a platform for young minds to express their ideas. Today's webinar will be relooking at heritage conservation and will be presented by architect Pragya Nagar. First and foremost, I would like to honor our mentor, architect Premindra Raj Mehta, who is also the former president of the Council of Architecture. I request Mehta sir if you could say a few words and motivate us. Sir, you're muted. Mehta sir, you're muted.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. All the participants, in particular, very warm welcome to you, Pragya, that you've chosen to share some of your ideas with us. And I am very pleased to see this fourth edition, which Tushar very actively is organizing. And this gives an opportunity to new ideas to be shared. You see, it could be young mind, it could be an old mind, but the idea needs to be new. And I'm very happy that this thought process is picking up. We are getting a variety of ideas being thrown open here, be it software, be it technology, be it how human habitat has to be looked at, what we would see today possibly from Pragya, that reconstruction or reuse or conservation as somewhat an alternative to the built spaces we already have. So I think some bright ideas are coming up, and we at Periyar, we are very committed to carry these forward at policy level, and also seek certain kind of intervention from all concerned, including the profession, if need so arises. Uh, Periyar School, let me share with you, is an idea to um, create a public institution, a forum where we all could learn. And the idea is that it would not be a conventional educational system, but a system or an opportunity for anyone and everyone to come in and join in whatever interests them when it comes to architecture or human habitat. So what we intend to do is to have short-term courses, summer studios. So idea is that even if you're studying anywhere else, even if you have already studied architecture in terms of acquisition of degree, but you still have an urge urge to learn on your own, then what we provide is a set of experts who have excelled in a particular aspect of architecture or human habitat or a built environment, and they would offer some kind of a course. Idea being that they would like to share what they have possessed, what they have in their possession. So it's that. And we would have very small groups, maybe 15, 20 in each of those specialized courses. They could be from environment, they could be from sustainability, they could be acoustics, they could be illumination, any detail which attracts the practitioner or propagator. He would like to share it with some. And those who are interested in that particular subject, is how it influences architecture, be it aesthetics, be it proportions, be it art in architecture, whatever would interest anybody, because architecture encompasses everything. It is from design to construction to art to sociology to economics. So all put together, so any aspect which would attract anybody, he could come and initiate either his own course or be a part of what others are doing. And around that, we would build a PRs program, which may be syllabus focused. So the idea is that we would keep on changing, keep on modifying it, keep on relooking at it, what we have, keep on looking at what society demands, and keep developing programs of learning. These are not programs, but they would be the programs for learning.
Sir, you got muted again.
We would have summer courses, we have winter programs, we may have architectural tours for people to relook at either nature or history or contemporary works which are being done, to understand uh, what do they want to communicate, what message they want to send to people, what do they want to say, how they exist, and how they want this to exist. So that's the idea. It could be in India, it could be outside India. So that's the kind of spread we plan to have. We have initiated some of these programs, and one such is this Every Friday series, where we expect new ideas to get generated. This is for generation of new ideas from anyone. He could be a student of architecture, he could be a practicing architecture, or he could be a teaching professional, or he could be from any other stream. Because what we believe is that every subject, be it environment, be it science, be it botany, be it zoology, everything has an impact on architecture and impact on the way we live. And the ultimate goal being that can we have a little better environment for ourselves, little better sustainable in the sense that we care for each other, uh, between us, plants, animals, birds. You see, so it's a caring world if we can create. So that's the whole idea, and we are looking forward to some new ideas. So if you have any idea, any one of you or any of your friend whom you know, he has some idea about something which bothers him, something which he feels will be the future. It is nothing in front of us. There is nothing which bothers us, but one feels that if this idea is pursued, maybe This could give us better opportunities in times to come. Please tell them to share it here. Please tell them to be a part of it. It will help you articulate that idea. It will maybe activate some other minds to think in that direction. And we would be committed to carry it forward the way you would think you would need to carry it forward, or you visualize it to be carried forward. And whatever little we can do towards that, we would be very happy to do that. So, very warm welcome once again to all the participants, Pragya Nagar in particular, and Tushar, take them where they want to go.
Thank you so much, sir. So I will now introduce our speaker for today's webinar, architect Pragya Nagar. She is an architect working in the field of conservation and has worked on projects such as the conservation and upgradation of various facilities at the Red Fort and also the Begumpur Mosque. She completed her B.Arch from Amity University and is currently pursuing her master's in heritage conservation and regeneration from CEPT University, Ahmedabad. Today, she will be talking about heritage conservation, a sustainable means to provide continuity and change. I would request Pragya to now begin her presentation.
Thanks, Prashant. So I would like to begin by thanking Periyar School of Architecture and especially Professor Raj Mehta for this wonderful opportunity. I would also like to point out this amazing effort that they have taken to provide a platform, especially to young professionals, and create a larger dialogue and discourse, which is very important in the present scenario. When I was initially thinking of what can be pitched as a topic to Periyar School, I thought of different topics primarily centered around Delhi since I'm from Delhi and it's my city. I've worked here all my life. But then I realized that it is more important to create a larger dialogue to introduce heritage conservation that I am passionate about as a viable option and an alternative to architecture, to mainstream architecture, and introduce it amongst young professionals. I would also like to say that I'm still relatively new to the field. I've only been associated with heritage conservation for about 3.5 years, and there are still new concepts that I continue to learn each day. That being said, even though my understanding of conservation and heritage is still in its preliminary stages, I wanted to talk to all of you about this topic since you are also at the beginning of your career. And this is the pivotal point when you can really experiment and learn and work towards other ideas that excite you. You've gone through the 5 years of architecture. Maybe the core built architecture works for you, or you want to try something new, you want to work towards interior, set design, or heritage conservation. This is the time when you can really explore and see and have better opportunities. So you take up one internship, you like it, you don't like it, you take up other workshops and try to learn as much as you can. This is also the point and a pivotal point at that where you start working towards changes. You know of certain issues that are there in the field. This is the time when you say, you know what, this is how the field has been working and I want to change it. This is the time to really do that. So without taking any more time, I'll start with the presentation for today. Just share my screen. And is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and I'd like to apologize in advance if there's some background noise. There's some construction work going on. So if you hear background noise, I apologize in advance. So I've been talking of a lot of these concepts about heritage and awareness and conservation, and all of these are big, big terms. But let's break it down and understand what each of these means. You can write what you understand from heritage in the discussion box, and we can take it up a little later. So, what is heritage? In the essence of it, heritage is something that has been passed down from one generation to the other. It is something that we have inherited. It may be built or tangible, as it is called, something like the prehistoric petroglyphs of Ratnagiri, or the medieval towns that line the entire Indian subcontinent, like the remains of Hampi, or even modern heritage, like Gandhi Bhavan in Chandigarh and various other Le Corbusier buildings that
Pragya,
line.
I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, but have you changed the slide just now?
Yes.
So it's not, the change in slide is not visible on the like
These,
shared screen. It's still in the, it's not in the slide share mode in the shared screen.
wait, I'll share my screen again. Um, has it changed now?
So it's on the what is heritage screen right now.
Wait, I'll. Can you see it now?
No, your screen is not visible yet. Like the shared screen is not visible. Yes, but it's
Is
in,
that better?
yes, yes, no, it's fine.
Yeah. So, like I said, the tangible heritage, like the petroglyphs of Ratnagiri, remains of Hampi, and relatively modern heritage like Gandhi Bhavan, Chandigarh, and various other Corbusier buildings. But apart from the built and the tangible, uh, there are practices and festivals that we follow, and these are part of our cultural identity. Practices such as the chanting of Ladakh or traditional crafts like the brass and copper crafts of Punjab. Even festivals, ritualistic practices like the Durga Puja that are celebrated each year. In fact, Durga Puja was recently, about 2 months back, inscribed on the World Heritage List. These practices represent and express the knowledge and a skill and an integral part of a nation's cultural identity. These are aspects that make us who we are, and hence it is important to safeguard or protect each of these aspects, both the tangible and the intangible. As Marcus Garvey, a renowned Jamaican activist, said, a person without the knowledge of his past and history, his origin and culture, is like a tree without roots. Coming to the conservation practice in India and understanding who actually takes up conservation in India, who are the monitoring authorities, etc. The first being and the most important being Archaeological Survey of India, or ASI as I would refer to it here on. This particular agency was started in 1861 by Alexander Cunningham, and it is often criticized for still following practices that were started during the British rule, and rather than updating their mandates to cater to the present scenario. Currently, they have about 3,691 monuments under them, which are centrally protected and conserved by ASI. Apart from this, we have the state archaeology. So each state has its own archaeology department that looks after certain structures that are relatively smaller or less significant. The Delhi State Archaeology, let's say, currently has about 40-45 odd structures that it looks after. Apart from these governmental organizations, we have the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, or INTAC, which was founded in 1984, and it's an NGO, and it was the first organization that sort of moved away from the engineering and archaeological approach. Apart from these, there is UNESCO, which is part of United Nations, and the World Heritage Convention. So when a monument or a structure has an outstanding universal value, it is not just significant for that nation, but the worldwide perspective on architecture and heritage, it gets UNESCO World Heritage tag. So not only it is monitored by, let's say, ASI or whatever nodal agency of that country, it gets additional funding and representation through UNESCO. In India, all our cities are dotted with monuments and structures, with domed tombs and sunken bawlis, and have several layers of history embedded within it. And yet, we only have half the number of listed protected monuments as compared to New York City. This map shows and represents the various listed World Heritage Sites throughout the world in different nations, and you can see the stark difference between Europe and India. In India, which is known for its culture, the rich culture and heritage, we barely have 40 sites. Taking the case of Delhi itself, the city is known to have been settled over 7 times. So there were 7 times. Delhi को 7 बार बनाया गया, and New Delhi is essentially the ninth city that we know of. And yet there are layers and parts of Delhi that are still unexplored. Parts like the Mehrauli village, a village that surrounds the Qutub complex and was the first settlement of Delhi. It has monuments and structures and remains that date back to the Chauhan dynasty. This particular temple that you see, the Yogmaya temple, it's right besides the Qutub complex and is the oldest known temple in Delhi. Over the years, as other parts of Delhi were settled, Mehrauli grew and reduced in size and the population that it had. And over the years, it became a retreat for the late Mughal and as well as the British rule. This structure that you see, Zafar Mahal, was one of the last structures that Bahadur Shah Zafar built in India. It was his retreat. He had beautiful mango groves that covered the entirety, and what remains of this palace now is just the door. Parts of the palace have been encroached. There is no maintenance that happens, and it's in a derelict condition. Similarly, the Kuli Khan tomb, a unique structure in itself. This particular tomb was brought by a British civil servant, and he converted it into his house. He added to the structure and made a garden around it. This is right beside you. There is actually a path that leads from the Qutub complex to Kuli Khan tomb, and yet nobody really knows about it. The Kashmiri Gate area, which played a pivotal role in the mutiny of 1857 and is still seen and continues to be a booming commercial market. The area is dotted with remains of the walled city and many colonial structures. It also encapsulates the Kamla Nehru Ridge, which is vital to the ecological perspective of Delhi, since it is one of the lungs of the city, as we call it, and a large green space that we have. When you start moving from the outer ring road towards Old City, you come across Kashmiri Gate. And in parts, even through the commercial market, you would see remains of the old wall that are now engulfed by this market itself. Even the Kashmiri Gate, well up to the 1970s, it had remains of the old wall. Of the old wall, you can see it in the archival photo. And now, due to the commercial ingress, the wall has been taken down and only the main gate remains. Similarly, the St. James Church, essentially a point where the mutiny started in Delhi and was is very important to the entire narrative of the mutiny that took place. This particular structure has evidences and documentation of how the mutiny took place. Till recently, this particular topper that you see of the cross was displayed within the church as well. They have photos and documentation of the mutiny. And post mutiny, the church, in order to calm the Indian audience after the storm of the mutiny, started appropriating their own culture and using parts of Indian culture to sort of say that, you know what, we can live in harmony. So there are, in the church you're not actually allowed to wear shoes, something that they took from Indian culture. In the church they have beautiful stained glass on the altar, and it's really something that we as architects should see, being this pivotal in the history and narrative of Delhi. Yet the structure was largely damaged by the metro construction that happened because proper impact assessment wasn't taken. The Kotla Mubarakpur, which most of us would know as a timber market. Most of us have gone here at various points of time whenever renovation has to happen. This is where you go and get your material from. And well up to the 1960s, it was actually a garden tomb. And what remains, only the main tomb is what remains of that enormous garden tomb. And even the tomb itself has been encroached by the residents that live nearby. The tomb is sort of dwarfed and blocked by new construction that is happening. Despite ASI and state archaeology and intact and all the other nodal agencies that are present, India is losing a significant part of its history each day. In UK, 55% of the construction industry budget is spent on repair, renovating, or retrofitting old heritage buildings. And they have over 9,000 allocated heritage and conservation zones and about 6 lakh heritage structures. These areas are considered desirable and have higher rents, higher land values, and also represent often a higher quality of life. Whereas in India, structures are pulled down for the very land that they stand on. For us, value of the land is much more than the actual structure. Such is the case of Esplanade Mansion, or Watson Hotel as it was popularly known back then. This particular 19th century hotel, which is right beside the Kala Ghoda Circle in South Bombay, this building is not only important from an archaeological perspective but also from the construction history of India. This is the oldest surviving cast iron building in India. It represents not only a technological advancement but also the it shows the trade routes and the connection that Bombay Presidency had at that point of time. The cast iron used in this building was brought from England. The person who designed Crystal Palace, England, worked on the structure as well. And in its entirety, it was a beautiful structure which now lies in a derelict condition. Until very recently, a lot of families and shop owners use the ground floor, and one of the reasons why it is in such a derelict condition is the low rent that was collected from them. So any damage that would have happened to that building since it isn't the structure has been altered would have also resulted in a significant loss of life as well. Most of the conservation efforts that are now taken up in India are are more penalization based rather than incentive based approach. Small incentives like tax exemptions and subsidies are not provided. So let's say I live in a heritage structure. If I pull it down, I am penalized for it. Rather, if I take up conservation, there is no incentive. Even finding small traditional materials is difficult for me because there is no subsidy. This is very evident in the case of Ahmedabad, which was the first city to be inscribed on the World Heritage List. AMC, or Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, who undertakes the maintenance and the monitoring work in Ahmedabad, is already overwhelmed by the number of graded structures. So each pole within the settlement would have at least two graded structures, and just the number of these structures runs in thousands. They can really not take up conservation of each of these structures. They currently are struggling with providing even basic amenities and infrastructure within the walled city, which leads to migration, especially of the younger generation, moving out of the more and more people are moving out of the old city now, and the commercial ingress is happening gradually. Initially, it was only on the main street, and now it's moving slowly towards the arterial and the pole route as well. uh, I had the fortune of interacting with a few of these people and actually asking them what the issue was. And especially the older generation replied by saying that they would love to continue to live in this area because they are very familiar with it. For them, they are more attached to that area or that pole rather than their house. It's their neighborhood. They've grown up with the same neighbors all their life. There's a particular temple that they go to every day and they have their own ritual. But if they don't move out, it causes a problem for the future generation. Their kids cannot get married, they don't have proper job opportunities, etc. And this is due to lack of poor infrastructure and quality of life that is happening. Even the residents now fear the involvement of the monitoring authority since a graded structure would mean lesser value for their building. New Delhi, which is on the tentative list for World Heritage nomination, most of the structures are not protected and are often inaccessible. Elsewhere in the world, uh, heritage conservation and heritage assets are known and protected not just from a sociological point of view, but also an economical. They have an associated economical value to it. They are seen as an economical asset and a source of regeneration. So there are monetary gains that can come out of tourism, whereas it's not seen in India. Let's take the case of Nizamuddin Basti. an area which was previously plagued by rapid commercialization and poor infrastructure, which is now being beautifully restored by Aga Khan Trust. So what Aga Khan did in this area was take a people-centric approach or a bottom-up approach, where they started analyzing what is the core issue why people are moving out of this predominantly residential neighborhood, and commercialization and commercial ingress is gradually increasing. And what they realized was this area was essentially established by traditional craftsmen who, due to lack of patronage and lack of job opportunities, have now started taking up odd jobs and have started moving out of the basti. So what they did was start reviving a lot of these traditional crafts. The built craft industry in India is not very well promoted. We do promote handicrafts, but we don't really promote built crafts. We can't find a jali or a traditional craftsman who actually knows how to make lime plaster anymore. So what they did was involve the people of the basti, especially the youth, in taking up small in and giving them training. So they particularly started with making glaze tiles, a craft in India which has been dead for centuries. They called Uzbek craftsmen to train the Basti youth and traditional craftsmen to actually start making tiles which they could use in the conservation process. They now, since most of the conservation has been done, they now start making products with these glaze tiles that cater to the tourism industry. They also started providing vocational training for women. So apart from using the Basti youth for uh, training them, providing them vocational training for computer, etc., so that they can be employed for ticketing, they also started training older women in making paper crafts. So when you go to those crafts were then used for souvenirs in the tourism industry. So now when you go to Sundar Nursery or Humayun's tomb, you can actually buy souvenirs that represent the structure that you've just visited. They also started with reviving the culture of that area. This particular stretch in Delhi has a rich cultural past of over 7,000 years. This is where Qawwali was started. So they started building performance areas where all of these gatherings could be held. They also revived a lot of the ecological aspects. So within Sundar Nursery, they planted more trees, revived certain species, and started using those species as a way so that there was more environmentally friendly, more birds could come. There are certain insects, certain plants that they have used that get more insects and butterflies within this particular area. And these small efforts that they did not only revived the Nizamuddin Basti area, but also had an exponential increase in tourism and visitors. Anyone from Delhi can tell you that Sundar Nursery is the place to be over the weekend. It becomes a hotspot. And even the things that they have done in terms of interpretation, their website is very informative. You can actually see the entire process that they have taken. There is a lot of transparency, and there is a lot that we can learn from the project that was done. Even in Humayun's tomb, they are very open about what they found and how they contradicted the work that had been done. And this project, it is the only sort of example of where urban renewal has worked in India. And it was also pivotal in changing how we look at heritage conservation in India, where rather than a top-down approach, we have a bottom-up approach of making conservation more meaningful for the people. Over the years, even ESI has sort of moved away from its engineering approach, as seen in the development works at Red Fort, and I was fortunate enough to be part of a few aspects of this as well. So, what they started with about 5 years ago was removing the layers of incompatible additions that had been done, both by the British and the later military occupation. So they started opening up the arches that were added in Chatta Bazaar, restoring the alcoves and the paintings that were there, removing the metal road, providing a toolkit so that all of the various shops in Chatta Bazaar have a similar feel to it, and the spatial narrative is restored. Even even though a large portion of the fort was lost post mutiny, where all of uh, these arcade walls that you see were taken down by the British, to build marching grounds for their army, and all of the palaces were build barracks for the army. A lot of it cannot be restored, and more importantly, the British lair has also now become part of the entire narrative of Red Fort. What ASI tried to do in the past 5 years was restore the spatial narrative rather than restoring the buildings. Like what you see at Naubat Khana, when you move from Chhatta Bazaar and go towards Naubat Khana rather than the metal road and the roundabout. Now they have an entire plaza, which is somewhat reminiscent of its past and its original spatial narrative. There are sit-out spaces that you can sit at and read the signages that they have. They have better interpretation now. Even the work that they have done in terms of tourist infrastructure, since it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, making the site more accessible. All of the roads have a area that can be used by someone who's on a wheelchair. There are tactile tiles that go throughout this area. They have ramps throughout. They've started making good like infrastructure investments. They have put proper toilet facilities at regular intervals, drinking water, an enormous publication counter. So ASI has good books that they publish each year. So one of the largest publication counter is in Red Fort, and you can buy small souvenirs and books from Red Fort itself. And the task that they have taken in the past 5 years is really monumental. But there are aspects of heritage conservation that are still unexplored. Concepts like adaptive reuse, which is basically retrofitting and repurposing a building for a new use. This is not only cost benefit. This not only has cost benefits, but is also a more sustainable option. It reduces the quantity of material that is used and also the waste that is generated by demolition and the construction industry in general. So even it reduces the suspended particles that are emitted when a building is demolished or the suspended particles when concrete is used. So adaptive reuse really is an alternative and something that should be looked at more often. Like in the case of this building that you see, this is the Zara building again in South Bombay, and it's right next to the Flora Fountain. This building was about to be demolished and replaced by another concrete faceless building. And what the architect proposed was retrofitting and repurposing the building for the store itself. And even though there was some criticism about this project, yet it continues to be a landmark and an icon in that area. And when you go to this particular stretch, you're really transformed. You feel that you are not in India anymore because the stretch has now really been restored and has a good integrity to it. Similarly, uh, the industrial heritage of Vadodara. So Vadodara had a lot of factories and old railway stations from the small gauge railways that existed here. And all of these factories had been sealed at various points of time. And now what they have started doing is reviving them and making them into art spaces and studio spaces. They have particular set outs in these areas. So they have within Vadodara there are a lot of universities and colleges and youth that is there. So they've made sit out spaces and they have regular poetry reading and discussions in these areas, and it becomes an activity space for students and a public space for these students. There are also new researches being taken up every year. So lime plaster, which was traditionally used in India before cement came into the picture, is now being relooked at as a carbon absorber. So lime basically absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide to gain its strength. So it is now being researched on uh, lime plaster covered buildings are being seen as these towers of carbon absorbers that can essentially reduce air pollution. Lime plaster craft and finding traditional craftsmen who know how to use lime is really tough in India. Whereas in France, lime is widely popular. You can buy tubs of lime plaster and it's still easily available. In India, this particular technique has been lost. There are policies that are introduced by Ministry of Urban Affairs like the smart city projects and the Hriday Yojana, which have a more development that see heritage as a source of development. But over the years, in 7 years since it was introduced, these projects lack awareness and implementation. In the various smart city projects, they have focused rather on development of infrastructure like roads, etc., and toilets rather than looking at the larger perspective. They also tend to focus more on the digital aspect rather than heritage and tourism. Even further, except for a few projects that were executed, merely remain as vision documents and nothing got physically executed on site. And without awareness, we would continue to lose important structures and aspects of our cultural identity. Important structures like this Bawli in Gurgaon. It's in Farooq Nagar, Gurgaon. And an area that is famous for Aero City and Cyber Hub actually has a rich Mughal layer to it. A layer that is gradually being engulfed and chipped away by the rapid commercialization and development. But all of this cannot be done without public engagement. How many of you have actually gone to a monument recently, taken a ticket, gone to various structures and actually seen a heritage monument? The UK National Trust has a membership of over 2 lakhs. In fact, the Indian National Trust barely has 7,000. And hence, awareness about conservation and making it meaningful for the people is is really necessary for it to succeed in India. And that is where I leave you today with the concept of heritage conservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Pragya, for the talk, and I'm sure it was very informative for the participants. So now I leave the discussion open for questions if some any participants, and especially encourage the students here, if you have any questions regarding heritage conservation, regarding the theme in general, then you please feel free to ask. We have the speaker here with us, and who would be very glad to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and speak, or if you want to post it in the discussion channel, then feel free to do that as well. But yeah, please do ask your questions. So in the meantime, let's say if I want to get the discussion started, I have one particular question for Pragya. You've talked about that there are certain amount of number of criticisms that are happening towards some of the nodal agencies, right, regarding the kind of practices that are being happened. So my question to you would be that what are the suggestions that you would have, or what are the kind of like what more do you think is possible or can be done by the nodal agencies in those conditions?
There is certain amount of criticism that the nodal agency has, but in my uh, sort of involvement with them, what I understand is that they're, like I said in the case of AMC, they're already overwhelmed by the numbers that they have. And whatever funding that they have, they are trying and putting it to good use. What I think can be done more is increasing visitors so that the economic generation happens. And also, as architects, if we start analyzing the context that we work on, should be a step ahead rather than putting everything on the nodal agencies. The ASI has about 3,000 structures. I don't really think that listing each structure and monumentizing it is the way ahead. Adaptive reuse can really put forth conservation and maintenance of structures. Even small things like the Kidwai Nagar redevelopment that happened, they have heritage structures within that area. Properly utilizing those spaces is something that we as architects can do.
Okay, okay, thank you. Yes, so if anybody else has a question, then please feel free to ask.
Tushar, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir, so please go ahead.
Okay, Pragya, very interesting presentation you made, giving different dimensions to what these kind of conservation programs can do, and they need not be just building related, but they should be activity related as well. So I have a question in this line is what do you think do we want nodal agencies to pursue what you think is the right thing or the right way, or you think these kind of idea testing be done by someone else, like let's say educational institution, to demonstrate that yes, there is a possibility? So what would be your take? Throwing it back on the nodal agencies which have 150-year or 200-year-old charter when it comes to conservation, or a new idea of what can conservation be experimented, tested by someone else? So what's your take?
So according to me, we can't get rid of nodal agencies. They have to be present for monitoring the activities, but we should really now start experimenting and seeing what we have a consortium of architects in India. We we have a lot of students, and these students being involved in the conservation process can really step ahead. So there could be site school where experimentations happen. Students of architecture can do a lot of documentation, which would really help the nodal agency. Students and young professionals can pitch their ideas. So these agencies have, instead of us sort of criticizing them, saying that you're not doing enough, we should now start helping them, saying that, you know what, we have this idea, maybe it can be put to good use.
Okay, that's one way of looking at it. I'm going one step ahead. That you have ideas, younger generation has ideas, even people have ideas, because they have witnessed what different archaeological survey of India, the government at state level or central level have done. Intech has done a lot in terms of documentation and once in a while showing how and what can be done. But they have acted more as an agent on a charter. What I'm saying is, if a charter needs to change, then who has to take initiative? Let's say ASI says if a monument has to be restored, this is the method. So supposing I don't enter into that arena at all, I say, okay, that's one part of monument conservation, restoration. You do it the way you want to do it. But here is an idea of a comprehensive conservation of not only building heritage or archaeology or art, but it's a comprehensive conservation at the community level. So that was my question, that if this new idea needs to be pursued in terms of not only, as you said, art and craft in isolation of occupation, so economics, culture, built environment, all put together, then where do we begin? Should we
So I
adopt as an institution? You see, individually, if you think you have an idea and you want government to do it, why should they take your idea? They do not even believe in your idea. They do not even think that that is part of their charter. So they would feel that, oh, we need to tread on something which is not in our domain. So let economic ministry come in, or let art and craft tribal area ministry should come in. So let's not get into that, because then we may end up with only maybe frustration that we had a good idea, there was no taker. So I am saying, okay, let's look at it differently. Our idea we pursue. So we only tell somebody that, okay, we are willing to adopt. So we cannot be a group of students. It has to be an institution. So that's what I said, that the new ideas, can these or should these be experimented by educational institutions who pursue the education or promote the education of conservation, and they should break the barrier of only conservation of building to conservation of community. So that was the idea which I was throwing open, and I wanted your reaction as a person who has some ideas. Okay.
So in this community-led conservation process, I think institutes like, let's say, Periyar School of Architecture can take up site schools, which can be the training platform for architecture students as well, and also serve as an example of how conservation can be done, or regeneration of the at a community level can be done. So I think as an idea, it can really be taken up by institutes.
Yeah. Okay. Tushar, yeah, you can carry it forward. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So if I see anybody else wanting to ask a question, I is let's just yeah. So if anybody else has a question, please take feel free to ask right now.
So I do have a question. So
Okay, yeah, Minu, go ahead.
yeah. So as young professionals, uh, do you think like what do you think that we can do for the field of heritage conservation?
That question. See, as young professionals, like if you're, if you are from the field of architecture, just contextualizing the project that you're doing can really be a step ahead and work towards the larger narrative of heritage conservation. Yeah. And if you're not from the field of from architecture, I think just being aware of heritage and being a little more sensitive to it can work miles. So, how many of us actually go to these monument structures just instead of every weekend going to some other mall, going to a heritage structure, buying a ticket can really work towards the economical aspect and regeneration and provide uh, monetary gains for that particular monument. Like we see in the Hoskas Fort area, since a lot of people started visiting it, more conservation effort was taken. There is now ticketization that happens because they want to monitor how many people come in. So just by visiting these structures and being more aware of it can really is something that we as the youth of this nation can do.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes, Ron, go ahead.
Basically, I wanted to ask you, like, what are your views on like adaptive reuse to promote heritage conservation? Like, basically, like if some building which is like in sort of a dilapidated condition, and we can basically like we see all the time see buildings with large spans or something like some old library which can now be used probably as a like a for example say a university or like a small college campus. So what are your views on how to conserve buildings by changing its use and like incorporating some modern elements so it's not like something that's ticketable, but it's still we retain certain parts of it but change the use completely?
Thanks for that question. So even in adaptive reuse, there are stages that are taken. So what I showed you, the Zara building, actually just retain the facade and change the entire interior of it to serve the purpose of the store that is now there. Even in Connaught Place, the H&M shop that is there has a similar process was followed. So it really depends on the architect and especially the structural engineer that you have on a particular project on the level of intervention that you can do. Also, how much the structure can now take, how old that structure is, how much can it be retrofitted. So there are aspects like new interventions of ACs that have to be put in, AC ducts, etc. That can happen, but you have to do it sensitively and really understand what the structure can now bear for it to happen. I hope that answers
Uh,
your.
yeah, okay, thank you. So do we have more questions now? Or if any of the previous speakers have a follow question? Okay, so we don't seem to have any more questions for this session. Then I guess we would now start with the conclusions. So I would like to thank Architect Pragya for the presentation, and I also thank all the senior academicians for their support and guidance. So before closing, I would like to inform everyone about the Every Friday webinar series that is being organized by the Periyar School of Architecture. The webinars are a platform for young professionals to express their ideas and are aimed at students and young architects. Further, as Sir explained in the beginning, we would also be running short-term courses in summer schools, the information for which will be presented to you very soon. The information for the future webinars and the courses that I mentioned as well will also be posted in our Telegram channels. So I request all the participants and the students, especially the students present here, to keep themselves updated with it. Uh, Sir, do you have something to add? Mehta, sir?
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I just want to thank everyone, particularly Pragya, that you took initiative to share some of your thoughts. I would ask you to write a very short note of what is your expectation. You see, where do you want to move here from? Where do you want world to move here from? Write a short note maybe, and that could be a starting point for us to initiate some idea or a action on your thought process. So that's on one side, and I want to thank all the participants who had come in. And once again, I would request them that if you have an idea, come in, contact Tushar, be with him, interact with him, and share your ideas. We would try to spread that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I will be posting the information or the platform on which you can share your outline. We would require a very small, short, 4 or 5 line outline of the idea that you want to share or the webinar that you want to talk about. And yeah, please send them in, and I would then work with you to make the webinar happen. With this, I end today's webinar. I thank everyone present, and please have a good day.